Hi, you're welcome back to this SQL Intermediate series. Now, in this series, we have tackled a couple of different use cases for SQL, but today we'll be going and we'll be discussing the user-defined functions. So, how do you write functions in SQL? I mean, for a few maybe users of Python and maybe some other programming languages, you probably know how you can write functions. But then most people probably do not know that you can also write like SQL functions as well. And what are the advantages of writing function? Function helps you organize your query and makes it even much more readable, because then you can define some formulas that you could basically use at several points in your query. So we could just dive into this and then we will get to understand even it better. So to write functions, we will be using the sales data set. The sales data set is found in the public data set of Bigquery. All you just have to do is go to Iowa Liquor Sales and then pull out this sales table. Now, in the sales table, you will notice that you have different transactions. I mean, different sales that was done at different, with different invoice and item number, and then a lot of other columns. But particularly, what we'll just use as an example in this particular case is this state bottle cost and state and then bottle sold and then sales dollars, and this is what we'll be using. So according to this table, we will make the assumption that the cost of the bottle is, like for the first show, you could see like the cost is 6. So we'll make the assumption that two bottles were sold and the cost of the two bottles were $6. And then the two bottles were sold for $18. So basically, we would like to know what was the profit per bottle. This is what we would like to know. And then we would like to calculate it for all cases. And so this is what we'll be doing in this particular case. So let's just dive into the query itself. So here we just click the query button, right? We click the query button, and to actually write a function, what we will be doing is we will start by saying create. So we'll create a temporary function, a temporary, which is temp, and function, right? And then we'll have to think, okay, so what we would like to name the function. So maybe we would like to name the function profit per bottle, right? So in this case now, then we will now have to think of, okay, so what are we trying to, what kind of calculation are we trying to do here? So we have like this the cost of the bottle. So we need the cost of the bottle, and then we need the number of bottles sold, and then we also need the sales in dollars. So here we could just name like, okay, so we could say, okay, maybe we could say sales in dollars, and then we put an int. So the idea here is just to, like determine, like just basically tell SQL like what kind of, you know, what kind of like field are you bringing in? So because then when you have this, like, I mean, you could also even use a at this point, but then you just wanted to know that it's actually going to get like a number, if it's going to get a float, if it's going to get like an integer or something like this. And so basically you just tell him like the input and what kind of form the input will be. So I think maybe we could use the float for the sales. So let's just assume like we're already writing the sales. A will represent the sales, so float. And then we have B, which is basically like representing the cost, which is also float. And then C, which is basically representing the bottles sold, which is going to be an integer. And then now, after we put like the inputs, the things that we consider to be the input, then we will go down and write the actual formula. But then before we write the formula, we just have to return what kind of format do we want to receive as the formula. So what format in terms of, is it going to be an integer? Is it going to be a float? So we could return that it will be a float, because in this case, now we will be having maybe decimal kind of places. We should allow decimals to work. And then we will put an as. So we put as, and then we'll write the formula. So what the formula in this case will be, it will be the sales minus the cost of the bottles divided by the number of bottles that was sold. So we will say A minus B divided by C. And basically, this is almost complete yet. Here we would have to return, and so we say returns, not return. And then we will have like a semicolon, which is basically now saying that we have completed our formula or our function. So, maybe we could just have a little bit of, write again back into what we have, written. And so basically before we now apply it. So here we will just say that we have created the temporary function, which is basically supposed to return a float. So basically, like, we have like input. So we have the inputs that we would receive in this function. So we already know, like, okay, we will be receiving three numbers. Two of them are floats. One of them is an integer. And then at the end of the day, we will be returning a float as the result of our query. So here now, what we could do is, so there is a bit of, so basically when you see, it's already telling us, like, okay, you have created a temporary function, but you must actually follow it up with an actual query. So this is exactly what we will do now. So we will just follow it up with a query. So here we would go and say, so we're selecting from the sales data, right? And then we could, in this case, bring back our calculation, right? And just put it here. And then go ahead and bring the arguments, which is basically like the sales in bottles, the sales dollars, right? So sale dollars, this is the first argument. And then we will bring the state bottle cost, which is state bottle cost, right? And then we will bring the bottles sold, right? So here you will have like the profit per bottle. Now, just to assign like the invoice number to each row, so we could just put the invoice number here, just to see that we are actually assigning it. So we have the invoice number. So here we could just write bring our query, so then it's looking even more beautiful, right? And then we'll put the from, and then we could actually run the query. So when we run the query, we will get, like, for each invoice, we will get the cost, which is basically the profit per bottle. We could also put the profit per bottle here, profit per bottle. And maybe we could even include all of these functions, like, all these fields, we can include it as part of our, rows, as part of our columns of the output. So basically here, so like this, we could basically go ahead and run the query again. And then you could see that we have, like, the first invoice item. We could have our calculation, which basically, like adds up and it gives us 15, dollars per bottle, which is, I mean, I think also maybe here we could even do our, you know, board mass properly, because then it's giving us like 15, and instead of maybe 7. So here we run it, and then you can see now it gives us 6, which is basically 18 minus 6, which is 12 divided by 2, and then you get 6. So I mean, the idea of these functions is very, very good.